So let's start with a bit of an overview of what the Atlas Plus has got to offer. So the project components from Foundation to Year 2, there's the student print atlas, and then there's the teacher dashboard, and I'll unpack that for you as we go along because there's a lot on that. And then in Years 3 and 4 and 5 and 6, there's also a student dashboard. Now the components are designed to be used flexibly, so it's not a program that you pick necessarily. You can, but you don't necessarily pick it up and say, right, I've got to start at activity 1 and go 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and work through them all. I'm really passionate about being able to cater to your context when you're teaching, and therefore that the suite's just designed for you to be able to say, look, my kids know the things that are in activity 2, so I don't need to do that. But activity 4, I'm going to actually spend a heap of time on that because that's what they really need. And I think that flexibility is really important to be able to cater to where your students are at. So the teacher dashboard, as you can see, has got professional support notes with teacher activities. It's got downloadable activity sheets, graphic organisers, planning documents. So anything that you need that goes with the teacher notes is there on the dashboard, and we'll see that in a moment. And you can just click on it and get to it. You don't have to sort of fiddle around. There's pre-assessment activities and then assessment activities to see how students went, which I'll talk about in more detail. The interactives, which I mentioned before, and there's also an online tracking component for student quizzes for Years 3 to 6. This is what the dashboard looks like. You can request to have digital samples for each level of the dashboard. You can see that up the top is the Atlas spread, and then down the bottom there's access to everything, the teacher notes and all the other activities. Similarly, the student dashboard has everything there. There's videos on that, mapping skills interactives, interactive maps, which we'll have a look at, topic interactives, coding and technology interactives, the Ausbox and the quizzes. The videos are all licensed, so they're very reliable, and this is what the dashboard looks like for students. So we'll have a look at some of the other components in a bit more detail now, but you can see again the students have access to everything they need just sort of at a click of the button there. So the print atlases are a revision or enhancement of what Oxford had previously. They keep the same structure, so if you have used them before, that part won't be difficult for you to get your heads around, but there's some new content which we'll have a look at. And so the structure is basically there's mapping skills in the front, the topic spreads, which I'll explain to you as we go along, and then world maps and case studies at the end. So just before we go through that, a really good question that we get asked a lot is, do students still need Atlas skills? They've got GPSs, they Google if they want to get somewhere, so what's the point of learning about Atlas skills? But in fact, there was a very recent study this year by Kirshner and DeBruckier which found that we tend to assume that because students were born into a digital world, they're information literate, but in fact they're not. And I quite like the description. They describe our digital native, well, the digital native as Yeti-like. So in other words, it's kind of like we think it's out there, but we don't really have evidence that it exists. So the shape papers that informed the Australian Victorian curricula identified that students need to be informed consumers of data and information, and therefore those elements of Atlas skills like scale, compass, directions, coordinates are built into the curriculum because they're the things that students don't know. They might know how to get onto a map on Google, but they mightn't necessarily know how to work out which way's north and therefore which way to go. So those sorts of skills are really essential. Map reading also covers other things like spatial reasoning skills. And one of the good things about it, I think from a teaching point of view, is there's really clear links to real life. So whether it's like your school evacuation map or looking at Australia's place in the world, mapping skills are kind of easy to engage students in because they've got a pretty clear application.